The pool was still. The woman floating on her back had not moved in 40 minutes. Then, from somewhere beyond the eucalyptus hedge, came a sound. Not a splash, not a voice, but something enormous breathing. The afternoon heat in Saguaro Flats, Arizona, had a particular cruelty to it. The kind that didn't merely warm a person, but pressed down on them like a hand on the back of the neck, insistent and personal. Theodora Vance had lived through 37 summers in this part of the country and had developed over time a philosophy regarding the heat. Do not fight it, do not complain about it, and above all, do not allow anyone to take your pool from you. The pool had been her husband Reginald's idea, installed the summer before he left for reasons that were never properly explained and were still, 4 years later, not fully understood. It was a 40-foot saltwater pool with a curved edge on the far side that made it look, from the upstairs window, like a half-moon cradling the desert. It cost more than Theodora's first house. It required more maintenance than her 3 children combined. And it was, without question, the most beloved thing she owned. She was standing at the kitchen window with a glass of iced tea when she first saw Marinda Calvo Westwick open the side gate. Theodora had given Marinda, her neighbor from 3 houses down, a woman who had moved into the cul-de-sac 14 months ago with a leased SUV, a freshly highlighted blowout, and an immediate sense of territorial confidence, a single key to the side gate. This was in November of the previous year, when Theodora was recovering from a knee surgery and Marinda had offered to let the pool technician in twice a week. The key was supposed to have been returned in January. It was now mid-July. Marinda Calvo Westwick did not knock. She did not ring the bell. She did not send a text message. She opened the gate with the ease of someone entering their own property, set down a tote bag embroidered with the words, "Sun-kissed and unbothered," kicked off her sandals on the pool deck, and unfolded a float, a large, inflatable flamingo, directly beside the water's edge. Theodora put down her iced tea. She watched Marinda arrange herself on the flamingo with the practiced efficiency of someone who did this regularly, and perhaps she did. Theodora had been in Tucson for 10 days at her sister's house following a minor family situation involving her youngest, Bryce, and a community college financial aid dispute. She had returned only this morning. She had not, in those 10 days, given Marinda any permission to use the pool. She had, in fact, not spoken to Marinda in close to 3 weeks, not since the neighborhood association meeting where Marinda had stood at the portable podium in the Garcia's garage and delivered an 8-minute presentation on what she described as shared community water resources, a presentation that Theodora later learned was directed, in its entirety, at her. The argument, such as it was, had begun 3 months prior when Marinda's daughter Presley had been found swimming in Theodora's pool on a Tuesday afternoon. Theodora had not been angry about this. Children swam, fences had gaps, the pool was visible from the street. What had bothered her was Marinda's response when Theodora mentioned it. Not an apology, not a thank you, but a slow blink and the observation that water is a community resource, Theodora, not a private commodity. This was the kind of statement that lodged itself in a person's chest like a splinter too deep to reach. Theodora had let it go. She had let go the unauthorized lapse Marinda's husband Fletcher took at dawn, which Theodora had observed twice through her bedroom window. She had let go the pool towels that appeared folded on the deck chair without explanation. She had even let go the single occasion she had found Marinda herself in the pool, who upon being discovered had simply said, "Your water temperature is perfect. You should really be proud," before climbing out with no sense of urgency whatsoever. But this, the float, the tote bag, the spread of what appeared to be snacks arranged on the side table, this was something different. This had a settled quality. This was not dropping in. This was arriving. Theodora walked through the sliding glass door and stepped out onto the pool deck. Marinda. Marinda was already on the flamingo, reclined, sunglasses on, a small portable speaker playing something tropical. "Theodora, you're back. How's Bryce?" "Fine. What are you doing?" Marinda tilted her head. "Getting some sun. It's 314 degrees out there, Theo. You should come in. I didn't invite you." "You never uninvited me, though." Marinda smiled. It was a generous, winning smile, the kind built over years of practice. "Besides, I'm just floating. I'm not hurting anything." Theodora felt the familiar tension behind her sternum that Marinda had a particular talent for producing, a tightening that lived somewhere between frustration and the dawning recognition that she was, once again, being handled. "I need you to get out, Marinda. I'll be out in 20 minutes. I have a thing at 4. Now." Marinda lowered her sunglasses. Her expression shifted slightly. not toward guilt, but toward the particular variety of calm that people deploy when they believe they have already won. Theodora, we're neighbors. Neighbors share. I let your dog sleep in my mudroom for 3 nights when he got loose last fall. I picked up your mail for 10 days. I let your kid... My dog sleeping in your mudroom was not something I asked for, Miranda, and you were not invited to pick up my mail. You simply did both of those things without asking and are now presenting them as debts I owe you. Miranda pushed the flamingo gently with one hand, gliding it in a slow arc. You're very tense, Theo. You should really get in the water. Theodora stood at the edge of the pool and looked at this woman, floating in her pool on a flamingo she had brought herself, with snacks she had arranged on Theodora's outdoor furniture, playing music from a speaker she had set atop the rim of Theodora's potted agave, and felt something clarify inside her. Not rage, exactly. Something colder. A decision forming. I'm asking you to leave. I'm almost done. You're done now. Miranda sighed. The sigh was theatrical, unhurried. You know, this is why the Garcias stopped inviting you to things. Theodora took one step back from the pool edge. Get out of my pool, return my key, and don't come back through that gate unless I specifically ask you. Are we clear? Miranda said nothing. She had drifted to the center of the pool on her flamingo. Her sunglasses were back in place. Her hands were trailing in the water. Theodora turned and walked back inside. She went to the kitchen. She poured out her iced tea, which had gone warm, and refilled it from the pitcher. She stood at the window again and watched Miranda floating in the center of the pool, motionless, as if the conversation had not happened at all. She reached for her phone and called her youngest son, Marco. Marco was 31 and worked in property management and had, over the years, developed a talent for de-escalation that Theodora simultaneously admired and resented. She's still in the pool, Marco. Who, Mrs. Calvo Westwick? She's floating on a flamingo. She brought snacks. There was a pause. Mom? Have you considered? Don't. Just asking her nicely to... I asked her. She told me I was tense. Another pause. Okay, do you want me to come over? No, I want her out of my pool. Have you tried turning off the... I'm not going to do anything to the pool, Marco. This is a property rights issue, not a plumbing issue. She hung up. She stood at the window for another 7 minutes. Miranda did not move from the center of the pool. The flamingo rotated slowly in the light. The speaker continued its tropical rhythm. And then Theodora heard the sound. It came from the side of the property, beyond the eucalyptus hedge that separated her yard from the access road running behind the properties. She had heard this road used before: utility trucks, the occasional lost delivery vehicle, once a man on a bicycle who had stopped to eat a sandwich against the fence and then inexplicably continued on. What she heard now was not a truck. It was a rhythmic, heavy sound, a slow percussion of weight moving deliberately through packed desert gravel. She went to the side window. She leaned forward. She saw nothing through the hedge but movement. A shape, brownish beige, large, moving with a rocking, unhurried gait. She moved to the back door and stepped outside, not to the pool deck, but to the side yard, the strip of gravel and dry grass between the eucalyptus hedge and the fence. She reached the gate in the hedge, the same gate Miranda had used, and looked through the gap where the latch didn't quite close. What she saw stopped her completely. It was a camel, not a small camel, not a figurative camel, not a camel on a logo or a camel in a fever dream. A real, living, breathing, single-humped dromedary camel, approximately 6 feet tall at the shoulder, dusty tan in color, wearing a frayed rope halter and nothing else, walking along the access road behind her property with the unhurried authority of something that had never once in its life been told what to do. Theodora stared. The camel turned its head and looked at her. Its eyes were large and dark and utterly without concern. It continued walking. Theodora looked down the road in both directions. There was no one following the camel. There was no truck. There was no panicked owner jogging with a lead rope. There was just the camel, moving west along the back road, past the Garcia fence, past the Delacroix fence, past the edge of the eucalyptus hedge. And then the camel stopped. It turned its head. It looked at Theodora's gate. And then, with a movement of its neck that suggested this was simply the next item on its agenda, it pressed its head against the gate latch. The gate swung open. Theodora took one step backward. The camel walked into her yard. In a lifetime of unusual events, And Theodora Vance had accumulated more than her share, beginning with the afternoon at age 9, when she had watched her grandmother win a truck in a livestock raffle, continuing through the circumstances of Reginald's departure, and culminating in the phone call 2 years ago, in which her oldest daughter Cassidy had announced she was moving to Finland permanently to study reindeer cognition. Nothing had prepared her for the particular sensation of watching a camel walk into her side yard and approach her swimming pool. The camel moved with complete confidence, its long legs covering the gravel in 4 strides, its neck extended forward, its nostrils moving. It reached the edge of the pool deck and stopped. It looked at the water. It looked at Miranda. Miranda had not yet seen it. She was still on the flamingo, eyes closed now behind the sunglasses, one hand trailing in the water, the speaker still going. The camel stepped onto the pool deck. "Miranda," Theodora said. Miranda did not respond. The camel's front hoof connected with the concrete deck with a sound like a dropped bowling ball. Then the other front hoof. Then the back legs, folding down in the particular buckled knee sequence that camels use to lower themselves. And suddenly this enormous animal was kneeling at the edge of the pool with its face over the water. Miranda opened her eyes. For 1 full second she and the camel looked at each other. Then Miranda screamed. The scream was genuine. Not the theatrical kind she deployed in social situations, but a raw, involuntary sound that had nothing rehearsed about it. She threw herself backward off the flamingo and went under, came up gasping, sunglasses gone, hair plastered across her face. She scrambled toward the pool steps and hauled herself out, slipping once on the submerged bottom step, and stumbled backward across the deck. The camel watched this with complete serenity and then lowered its face into the pool and began to drink. Theodora stood very still. Something moved in her chest. Something that was not amusement exactly, but was adjacent to it. She watched the camel drink from her saltwater pool with long, deliberate pulls, its throat moving. She watched Miranda standing at the far edge of the deck, soaking wet, clutching her own elbows, staring at the animal with an expression that had, for the first time in Theodora's memory, nothing composed about it at all. "What is that?" Miranda said. It was not a question exactly. It was the sound a person makes when their processing has lagged behind reality. "That is a camel," Theodora said. "I can see it's a camel, Theodora. Why is there a camel in your pool?" "That's a good question. Where did it come from?" "It came through the gate." Miranda looked at the gate. She looked back at the camel. She looked at Theodora. In 14 months of neighborly friction, this was the first time Theodora had seen something genuinely shake her. The composure, that carefully maintained, socially armored composure, was entirely gone. What was left was a wet woman in a swimsuit, standing on someone else's pool deck, shaking slightly, trying to locate the appropriate response to a situation for which she had no protocol. "You need to call someone," Miranda said. "Do I?" Theodora said. "Theodora, there is a camel drinking your pool water." "There is, indeed." "Why aren't you doing something?" Theodora looked at the camel. The camel had finished drinking and was now pulling itself back upright, the reverse of the folding motion, back legs first, then front, rising to its full height and shaking its head once, sending pool water in an arc across the deck. It turned and looked at the flamingo float, which had drifted to the edge of the pool. It extended its neck and sniffed the flamingo with deep suspicion. "I think," Theodora said, "that you should go home, Miranda." Miranda looked at her. Then she looked at the camel. The camel had taken the flamingo's neck in its teeth and was shaking it with mild but committed interest. "The key," Theodora said. "Leave it on the table." Miranda stared at her for another moment. The calculation happening behind her eyes was visible in a way it normally wasn't, the usual layers stripped away by the absurdity of the situation. Theodora watched her decide, for once, not to argue. Miranda reached into her tote bag, grabbing it from the side table with wide-eyed speed, giving the camel as much distance as the deck allowed, and unclipped the key from her keychain. She set it on the table with exaggerated care, as if she were disarming something. She picked up her tote. She looked at the camel one more time. The camel had released the flamingo, which was now punctured and deflating slowly at the edge of the pool. Miranda walked to the gate, opened it, and left without saying another word. The gate swung behind her. The camel stood on the pool deck in the afternoon sun and looked around at Theodora's yard as if taking inventory. After a moment, it walked to the shade of the pergola beside the pool, folded itself down onto the concrete with a sound like furniture being moved, and lay there in the shadow, breathing slowly. Theodora stood in the middle of her yard and looked at it. She took out her phone and called animal control. They told her they'd have someone there in 45 minutes to an hour. She went inside and poured a new glass of iced tea. She came back outside and sat in the chair beside the pergola, 6 feet from the camel. The animal turned its head and looked at her. Its eyes were still completely without agitation. "Well," Theodora said, "you're welcome." The camel said nothing. It laid its chin on the concrete and closed its eyes. Theodora sat in the heat and drank her iced tea and listened to the silence where Miranda's speaker used to be and thought that all things considered, this was the best afternoon she'd had in a very long time. The animal control officer who arrived 50 minutes later was a young man named Cortez Malibran, 26 years old and 7 months into the job, who had handled feral dogs, wayward javelinas, a particularly aggressive peacock in the Mesquite Hills subdivision, and on one memorable occasion a Burmese python someone had released in a storm drain. He had not yet handled a camel. He knocked on the front door with the professional expression of someone preparing to be surprised, and then was, in fact, surprised when Theodora opened the door and said, "He's in the backyard. He's calm. He's been lying down for about 40 minutes. Cortez followed her through the house and out the sliding glass door and stopped when he saw the camel. "Ma'am," he said, "I know. Is that—" "Yes." Cortez approached the camel the way you approach something that could be asleep or could be waiting. The camel opened one eye. Cortez stopped. The camel regarded him without particular concern and closed its eye again. Cortez turned to Theodora. "We got a call about 40 minutes before yours. Somebody on Route 9 reported livestock on the access road. We had a unit go out, but by the time they got there, the animal was gone." He looked at the camel. "I think this might be it." "What gave it away?" He almost smiled. "I'm going to call this in. We have some information about a camel that went missing from a private handler out in the Sonoran Preserve. Fellow named Augusto Weir runs a kind of animal experience operation, trail rides, educational tours, that kind of thing. He was already on the radio. This is probably his. It came through my gate," Theodora said. "The latch is loose. It pressed its head against it, and the gate opened." Cortez nodded, as if this were not the strangest sentence he'd heard today, though Theodora suspected it was. He stepped away to make the call, and Theodora sat back down in her chair. The camel had not moved. Its breathing was slow and coastal. While Cortez was on the radio, Theodora heard the side gate open and turned to see her neighbor from directly next door, Dominic Ferreira, 61, a retired civil engineer who communicated mostly in nods and occasional observations about weather, leaning through the opening with an expression on his face that was, for Dominic, the equivalent of wild excitement. "Theodora," he said, "there is a camel in your yard." "I know, Dominic. I saw it from my upstairs window." He came the rest of the way in, hands in his pockets, and walked slowly to the edge of the pergola. He looked at the camel for a long moment. "Beautiful animal. It drank from my pool." Dominic nodded. "They can drink 20 gallons at a time." "Wonderful. Heard the commotion earlier." He said this without looking away from the camel. Miranda's car pulled out of the cul-de-sac pretty fast. "She was visiting." Dominic's mouth moved in what might have been a smile. "She left her float," he said, gesturing toward the deflated flamingo at the pool's edge. "She can have it back," Theodora said, "when she explains why she thought my pool was available to her whenever I'm out of town." Dominic nodded. He said nothing else. He was, Theodora had always appreciated, a man who understood when a situation had already spoken for itself. Augusto Weir arrived 22 minutes after Cortez's call. He was a wide, weathered man of about 55, with sun-darkened forearms and a rope halter in his hands that matched the frayed one already on the camel's nose. He came through the gate Cortez had propped open, took one look at the camel lying in the pergola shade, and let out a breath that sounded like weeks of tension leaving his body. "Majid?" he said. The camel lifted its head. "There you are, you absolute disaster." He crouched down and ran his hand along the camel's neck. The camel pushed its face against his shoulder with something that was clearly affection. Augusto looked up at Theodora. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. He got out through a fence gap this morning. We've had people looking all day." "He was very polite," Theodora said. "He drank some pool water and lay in the shade." Augusto laughed, a full, genuine laugh. "Salt water? Really?" "Salt water. He's done that before, actually. We had him near a horse trough that had mineral salt in it, and he shook his head. He self-medicates with electrolytes." "Honestly." Cortez was filling out paperwork. Dominic was still watching the camel with quiet wonder. Theodora stood in the late afternoon light of her own backyard and felt, beneath the strangeness, something settling. The day had begun badly. She had come home from 10 days away to find her pool occupied without permission, her property used as though it belonged to someone else, and the years-long effort she had made to be accommodating quietly taken for granted. She had asked, reasonably, for someone to leave. She had been told she was tense. She had been reminded of debts she had never incurred. And then a camel had walked through her gate. She did not believe particularly in the kind of universe that arranged events to make points. She was practical. She had been an accountant for 22 years. She did not look for meaning in coincidence. But she stood there watching Augusto Weir coax Majid the dromedary camel back to his feet, watching the animal rise with that ancient, jointed, unhurried grace, looking around the yard one final time as if taking a photograph. And she thought that sometimes the world had a way of doing the thing you had been trying to do politely for months, except the world did it in one afternoon and without apology. Majid paused at the edge of the gate. He turned his head and looked at Theodora. The look lasted 3 full seconds. Then he walked through the gate behind Augusto, and the gate swung closed. Dominic walked back to his own yard. Cortez finished his paperwork and left. Theodora picked up the deflated flamingo. She rolled it up and set it by the gate. She would leave it there. If Miranda wanted it, she knew where to find it. She went inside and changed into her swimsuit and came back out and got into the pool. The water was still warm from the afternoon sun, slightly rougher than usual at the edges from the camel's entry, and with a new quality to the light on its surface, as if it had been briefly returned to something it had always been before anyone had thought to claim it. She floated on her back. The sky above was the deep, saturated blue that the Sonoran Desert produced at this precise hour, just before the orange crept in from the west. There were no clouds. There was no sound from the neighbor's yard. There was no tropical speaker. There was no conversation she had not chosen to have. She closed her eyes and floated in the silence, and for the first time in months, the pool felt entirely like hers. Part 2. 3 days after the incident. This was what Theodora had taken to calling it privately. The incident, though she was aware this,